It's crazy how fast time flies. I still remember being quite doubtful about Star Wars Resistance back when we got our first teaser on it, and now Season 1 is already over. So, how does it stack up? Surprisingly, it isn't half bad. As for spoilers, I'll try to keep this review as best spoiler-free as I can, especially for the folks who still haven't seen Resistance and are on the fence about it. So, Resistance starts out of Kaz Xiono, a New Republic pilot who ends up deserting his squadron in order to join Leia's underground resistance movement against the First Order. Despite being a pilot, Kaz is put to work as a spy on the Colossus, a massive refueling station on the ocean planet of Castilon. Once there, he goes to work as a mechanic for former Alliance pilot Jarek Yeager, where he also meets his co-workers Tam Rivora and Niku Vozo. While his job as mechanic was merely only used as a cover-up, Kaz would always do the best he could in spying on First Order activity on the actual Colossus itself, as will from time to time join Poe Dameron on recon missions in space. And in his spare time, Kaz would also take part in a few races against the Aces, which were also the Starfighter defense force for the Colossus against pirate attacks. Eventually, after a slow but deceitful process, the Colossus would be taken over by the First Order, which would see Kaz resist along with the likes of Yeager, Niku, and the Aces in attempting to free the Colossus from First Order control. Now, I just think it's great that the show that everyone, including me, originally assumed was going to be some goofy, racing-focused cartoon with a dumb protagonist, whereas it actually became a seriously tight political thriller and with some great character growth on the part of Kaz. Don't get me wrong, the show is a slow burn, especially at the start, and the vast majority of episodes all take place on one location, the Colossus. Back on Rebels, I got tired of Lothal pretty quickly, but yet Resistance somehow makes the Colossus interesting in almost every episode. So honestly, I never really saw that as being a bad thing. Besides, unlike Rebels, which was more about exploration and adventure, Resistance, I'd say, is more focused on politics and espionage. It's a different take on Star Wars, especially after something like Rebels, but I found myself enjoying it far more than I thought I would. Especially the art style, which, again, I originally wasn't too keen about at first, but it didn't take long to grow on me and now I really dig it. My favorite episode has to be without a doubt Episode 9, the Platform Classic, where Yeager is reunited with his estranged brother and takes part in his first race of the series. We always kept hearing just how good Yeager is of a pilot and a racer, so this episode was the perfect showcase for his skills. Not only that, but I was extremely surprised at the dark history between him and his brother. Like, I'm not kidding, it's some real dark stuff. And at the same time, I was also very impressed that Disney decided to okay this in a kids show. Not to mention, this is also the first episode where things start getting kind of serious on the show. In addition, the episode did give us a little bit of world building, especially of the Goofy and Death Gang making an appearance, that I really did enjoy seeing. Alright, well, let's talk about some of the negatives now because the show isn't perfect. One of the few things that did worry me initially was the show would be mostly about Starfighter racing and the Ace Squadron, which I dubbed at first being the Star Wars version of the Power Rangers because that's kinda how they look like in the teaser. But yet, funny enough, that couldn't be farther from the truth. In actuality, aside from a few episodes, there really isn't that much racing, and the Aces themselves make far and few appearances on the show, which strangely kinda bummed me out, as after the few racing episodes, I wouldn't have minded to see a bit more, or even more from the Aces themselves. Some of the Aces had such little screen time or dialogue where it was kind of downright disappointing. Take Bo Keevil for example. We've got an entire season of the show completed now, and all we know about him is that he's a Kildor male, part of the Ace Squadron, and pilots the Yellow Ace. And that's about it. He barely says anything to the point where the show's featurette didn't even feature his voice actor, unlike for the other Aces. Not to mention his wiki page is also bare bones of information too. And let me tell you, it's not that much better for the other Aces either. For myself, my drive in wanting to watch Resistance in the first place was to learn more about the canon lore in the galaxy at the time. And while we do get bits and pieces of that here and there, I was undoubtedly the most disappointed of how little we do get to see of the New Republic in the show. Aside from the very first episode where we do get to see the New Republic Starfighter Corps in action, as well our first look of the New Republic pilot uniforms and the T-85 X-Wings, there wasn't anything else New Republic related after that, which suffice to say, yeah, sucked. To make matters worse, Kaz for whatever reason chose to pilot and engage in combat in the Fireball, an old restored racer that not only wasn't prepped for combat, but also suffered random malfunctions. And this made no sense to me from the get-go on why he chose the Fireball over his New Republic T-85 X-Wing, which was amazing for combat and still kept with Poe. I mean, I get why they wanted to use the Fireball in the show as much as possible, for merchandising purposes to sell toys to kids and all that. But at least get rid of Kaz's T-85 X-Wing or something like that. So at least there's some logical reason on why Kaz is flying the Fireball over the T-85 X-Wing. Because yeah, flying the Fireball into battle was not practical in any way. Again, having random malfunctions in battle is the last thing you want when fighting the First Order. And it kinda seems the writers forgot about that. But other than those small issues, I found Resistance as a whole a fun ride. Sure, there were moments that were of course put in there for younger viewers. But after the mid-season, I found there being less of those moments as things were starting to ramp up and the show taking a more serious tone. Surprisingly, there were even some pretty brutal deaths in the last episode, as well as some pretty good animated aerial combat which did remind me of World War II dogfights, which of course were a major inspiration for the show. And just like Rebels, Season 1 ends on I'd like to say a satisfying cliffhanger, with Season 2 expected to continue off after the events of The Last Jedi. And what can I say, despite not being initially sold on Resistance beforehand, I'm now without a doubt a fan of the show after Season 1. And knowing how Season 1 ends, I think it's safe to say that the show will start featuring more locations per episode in Season 2. Which should be a nice change, as even though I love spending Season 1 on the Colossus, I think it's high time we start exploring the rest of the galaxy in this amazing art style. But what did you all think? Did Resistance live up to your expectations? What are some of the things you liked or disliked about it? And if you haven't seen Resistance yet, do you think now it may be something up your alley? Let me know in the comments down below. N7 from Silo, signing out.